Good evening. My name is Evelyn Baker. For those of you who I haven't met yet personally, I'm the Deputy Director of Community Planning and Development. I'm thrilled that you're all back for round two. This evening is going to be a really exciting session. We're going to be learning more about small area planning. Last week we learned a little bit more about a larger area, citywide planning, but we're going to drill down into a little bit more detail looking at a smaller neighborhood planning level. We're about to launch into a really action-packed, really dense sort of presentation on some really interesting stuff related to small area neighborhood planning. We've got the format for each one of these sessions is we'll have someone from the city and then someone not from the city coming to present to you. So this evening we've got Steve Nally from CPD in the back of the room waving to y'all. He'll be up front in just a moment. And then we've also got Joel Noble. He's our non-CPD person. Joel is a member of the Denver Planning Board, so that's a volunteer position as representing the citizens, and then also very active in his RNO here in Curtis Park.
So we're going to talk tonight about neighborhood plans, but first let me introduce myself. The neighborhood right behind here across the alley is Curtis Park, and for several years I was the president of Curtis Park Neighbors. I've lived here just under 25 years. And before I moved in, the neighborhood completed a neighborhood plan. And I'll spend some time talking about that and how that's helped in our neighborhood in order to be an example of what neighborhood plans can do. I want to link what we talked about last time to neighborhood plans. We talked about Blueprint Denver, and within Blueprint Denver, which is the citywide plan for land use and transportation, Chapter 8 is small area planning. Just a word about terminology. Neighborhood plan, station area plan, corridor plan, small area plan, they're all the same thing. We use slightly different words depending on what kind of area we're talking about, but from Blueprint Denver's perspective and kind of from a legal perspective, they're all the same. They're all small area plans. In Blueprint Denver, it spends some time talking about how you do small area plans and the fact that when a small area plan is completed, it's adopted as a supplement to the comprehensive plan. So really, as a city, we have one main plan, and we keep adding and updating supplements to it. And two things I want to highlight from the text of Blueprint Denver. At the top, it says small area plans must be in agreement with the comp plan, Plan 2000, and Blueprint Denver prior to adoption by City Council. So this means that while your neighborhood plans, your small area plans, can diverge quite a bit to be tailored to what the needs are and what the vision is in your area, the high-level principles that are agreed to citywide have to be respected. And the second thing is adopted by City Council. That means at the end of the process of doing a small area plan, City Council has a public hearing and formally adopts the plan as a part of the comprehensive plan to guide the development of the city. Down at the bottom, I've highlighted another section, and it talks about implementation. The recommendations in our neighborhood plans are intended to be implemented. They're not intended to just be a plan that sits on a shelf. Let me just disclaim for a moment, I'm not here on behalf of any group. You are going to hear my opinions because I'm here representing myself, and I think that's the best role I can play is as a fellow neighborhood person, not only telling you about the process and how it works, but sharing some advice and recommendations. So I'll come back to this in a little bit, but Curtis Park is surrounded by other neighborhoods. This is one of the earliest areas of Denver, and all these areas have different names that the residents know it by, and they have very different character. In 1987, we created the Curtis Park neighborhood plan, so it's just that center section. And this is what it looked like. The style of plans at the time was very text-heavy, kind of boring to go back to, and clearly before the invention of color. But I've highlighted just a few things I don't expect you to be able to read to illustrate the breadth of what's in these plans. Preserving historic character. Curtis Park is a neighborhood built in the Victorian era, largely from the 1880s through 1915. So it calls for that. It calls for doing more with the park. The very first park in Denver is Curtis Park, and this plan called for renaming it to Mestizo Curtis Park to represent the mix of ethnicities in the area, as well as directing some resources to the park, which was underutilized and under-supported at the time. There was very strong language in here about zoning. In the 1950s, when our own old zoning code was created, the city vision for Curtis Park was for it to go away. Downtown was going to grow this direction, and all the way up to 27th Street had downtown zoning. It was called B8, and you could build tall office buildings. And from there, from 27th up to downtown, the vision was for apartment towers. That's not how things played out. And this plan has some very strong language that says the existing zoning is hazardous to the neighborhood. It talks about traffic issues and city service issues. In this neighborhood in the 80s, trash wasn't being picked up regularly. The police weren't necessarily coming when you called. All of these things are appropriate to talk about in a neighborhood plan, whatever the issues are in your neighborhood. And really, this was one of my hesitations about this series of discussions, because the way it's set up, talking about citywide planning to small area planning to zoning, might suggest to you that it's all adding up to zoning. And zoning is very important. But small area plans can cover so much more. And because they're adopted by City Council, over the next decade or two, when you have one of these plans, you can refer back and work with the appropriate agencies and work with the appropriate partners and say, this has been identified as an issue we want to work on, whatever that issue might be. In our plan, not only were there general statements about what the issues were, but there were specific recommendations called out. And again, plan format has changed, but just to illustrate, maintain residential uses and historically significant structures. So over the years, we went and landmarked, which is historic preservation, and we referred back to this plan. And we told Planning Board and we told City Council that by creating these historic districts, we're doing what our adopted plan said. And furthermore, new development should be consistent with the character of what is already built, at least in the historic sections. And in 2010, when the city replaced the zoning code, we were able to refer to this, as well as some hand-drawn maps that were in this plan, to illustrate what the zoning should be. And basically, the zoning that we got in 2010 was very consistent with the vision in this plan, even though there was quite a gap between 1987 and 2010 until we could implement it. This is the strong language about the existing zoning in the neighborhood threatens the future stability of Curtis Park. And that also helped us in 2010. So fast forward past then, we've since had our plans updated. We have a station, the University of Colorado A line that runs from Union Station to Denver International Airport. The first stop out of Union Station is at the tip of the neighborhood, 38th and Blake. And so there's a station area plan. Again, just another small area plan, but it's that half-mile circle around 38th and Blake it focuses on. And then we did a new plan. This replaces the Curtis Park Neighborhood Plan. We did this in 2011, and it's called the Northeast Downtown Neighborhoods Plan. Because for all the good that we were able to accomplish in the Curtis Park plan, there were some issues. The plan stopped at the alley right behind this building. So there wasn't really a lot it had to say about how Welton Street and the neighborhood relate. There wasn't a lot to say about how the neighborhood and Arapahoe Square relate. So that map I showed you earlier with all those different neighborhoods, we found it very useful to take a more expansive view and do a bigger area at once, and that's what we did in the Northeast Downtown Neighborhoods Plan. Current plans have settled on a format, and each plan's a little bit different, but that starts with this plan on a page. And again, the text here is very small when you read the actual document. This is a 2-page spread, and it has a strategy framework, transformative concepts, neighborhood strategies, point by point. And because this incorporates multiple neighborhoods, there's neighborhood strategies for Arapahoe Square, Ballpark, River North, Curtis Park, all spelled out separately. Land use, if you see the second bullet under each one of these little sections is land use. It's in here, what kind of buildings, what kind of uses, but it's just one part of a comprehensive plan. The big transformative concepts, streetcar on Welton Street and Downing, what to do with 21st Street as a festival, Curtis Street as a priority pedestrian street, et cetera, are the big picture thinking in this plan. And here's just an illustration. Right now, the light rail network we have in the Denver region is really a regional system. It's about 1.5 miles between stops, except when it's on Welton Street, where, barring some gaps, it's every 2 blocks. It's a fundamentally different kind of system. It's more like a streetcar. And if we acknowledged it was more like a streetcar, how would we arrange it differently? What kind of vehicle would we have? How would it work with pedestrians and work with traffic? One of the vision elements. To do a neighborhood plan, to do it well, you have to get everybody involved. The credibility of a neighborhood plan, the buy-in from the community, hinges on you reaching past just those of us who would typically come to a neighborhood meeting and getting everyone involved, even if you have to bring translation, even if you have to go where they are rather than having them come to a centralized meeting, even if you have to have meetings at different times of day, because not everybody works 9-to-5 jobs. When you do that, you get big picture concepts that everybody can buy into. But not only do you need to bring the community to the plan, the city needs to bring the right resources to the plan. So for instance, in the 38th and Blake Station area plan, we said, okay, this is a rail station, we'd like to see more density, more development, lots of things happening here. And Public Works was brought to the table. And they said, of course you are aware that all the stormwater in a massive area drains to 38th and Blake Station area. Right there in the middle, that's Colorado Boulevard. Goes past Colorado Boulevard to Monaco. It's a huge area. And so, yes, you can do redevelopment there, but the requirements for building there and the things the city should do before the water gets there are significant. And this was not new knowledge, but those of us in the neighborhood didn't necessarily know that. We just knew that when it rained a lot, all the manhole covers would fly off, which happened. So this brought a perspective, the whole community coming together and all the technical resources that were necessary to consider all these topics. And we zoom into the 38th and Blake Station area. What's it going to take to develop this area? What's it going to take to have this be more interesting? Well, it might take sidewalks. You may not know that the city is not responsible for the sidewalks, which is really peculiar. It's kind of like the city not being responsible for the streets and everybody having to be responsible for the street in front of their own place. Hopefully we can change that at some point. But we were able to inventory where sidewalks were missing and where sidewalks were in serious need of repair, because that's a gating factor to the kind of redevelopment we want to see at 38th and Blake. And of course, the land use recommendations. Typically, the plans that we do in Denver divide land use recommendations into 2 general categories. Uses, what kinds of things go where, all residential here, a mix of uses, office and residential and retail here, maybe purely industrial over there. And so you'll see in the map various colors that have to do with various kinds of residential and various kinds of mixed use. Down towards the pink is downtown. Up towards the top is Downing Street to the right edge. And the red that goes through is transit-oriented development. It's a more intensive type of mixed use along Welton Street and Downing Street. So what kind of uses go where, and then how tall. The yellow in the middle, the core historic Curtis Park neighborhood, 2.5 stories is the pattern. And then shading up to 3 stories and 5 stories as you go over towards River North, Rhino. And then along Welton Street, that strip there, blue and pink representing 8 and 5 stories. And this is a good time to talk about the difference between neighborhoods that have a neighborhood plan and don't. So a neighborhood plan takes about a year to do. It might take a little longer. It really shouldn't take any shorter. And the reason is it takes time to get a diverse group of people together and learn how to talk to each other and come up with a shared vision. And we said Welton Street needs more activity. It would be great if more people were there, and we can support taller buildings there. In the blue, so right outside the building here, up to 8 stories, and above the 5 Points intersection, 5 stories. You might ask yourself, well, that's right up against the 2.5 stories. How can that possibly work? Well, also in the plan, I called out this text here. We said every time you transition to an adjacent neighborhood, you're right up against it, the buildings need to step down. They can't just go straight up from the alley line, 5 stories or 8 stories. The building itself needs to step down or needs to be back away from the small residential uses behind it. So over the course of a year or so, we came up with the broad brush of what we wanted to see and what would be acceptable, and found that common ground. Plans are not regulatory. They don't have to spell out in technical detail how it's going to work. That's zoning. That's what we'll talk about the third night. But zoning must be consistent with plans. So what the city has as the vision, what the neighborhood has developed as the vision, is what's checked whenever zoning changes. The zoning that's proposed has to be consistent with this vision. So we came to this understanding, and we said, provided that you step down in this way, we're all right with this higher density. Fast forward 2 years after this plan was adopted, and the upper portion of Welton Street that was 3-story zoning was then going to be proposed to go to 5-story zoning, and there was no controversy. Why was there no controversy? Because we'd already talked about it. Neighborhoods that don't have neighborhood plans are in the position of reacting to everything. Someone's going to propose a specific building. Do we like that? Is that too big? Is that too small? Does it have the right kind of uses in it? If we haven't talked about it ahead of time, everything becomes a drama. And as a citizen volunteer serving on the planning board, I see that distinction very starkly too often, and it does fall along the lines of if you have a neighborhood plan or not. So let's just look at a few more neighborhoods before I hand it off. In 2012, the Cherry Creek neighborhood plan happened, or it was adopted. Actually went for a couple years beforehand, but it was finalized in 2012. And they have different sub-areas: shopping district, Cherry Creek North, which is neighborhood, Cherry Creek East, which is a different neighborhood, a different density of neighborhood, Cherry Creek Triangle. Now, you're probably familiar with all the change that's been happening in Cherry Creek, and you might have some opinions about it. This is nothing like what Cherry Creek used to be. I miss it. Or this is exciting. Cherry Creek is like another downtown. You're welcome to your opinion. I'll tell you my opinion. Is it consistent with plans? Because the plans represent what the community wanted, and then what should happen should be consistent with the plans. So let's look at what the plan said. First, that upper area, Cherry Creek North, this is a residential area. The colors represent the land uses, so a lot of residential use down to 2nd Avenue and then shading into some regional center uses. That's a certain mixed use, and it's defined in the plan what they mean by that. And then how many stories? Well, limited to lower scale and 3 stories, and then shading up to 5 stories as you get to 2nd Avenue. If we go forward, the core of what we think of as the Cherry Creek Shopping Center, you've got regional center and town center, 2 versions of mixed uses, and then 12 stories and 8 stories. And notice between is that 2nd and 3rd, it's actually a gradient. Again, plans don't have to be precise. They have to express an intention. And what that gradient expresses is going down from 8 stories to 4 stories in between 2nd and 3rd. And so later when you do zoning, you create zoning regulations on how things can be built that match this intent. So 12 stories right along there on 12 and 8 stories on 1st Avenue as it turns to steel. So all those new buildings you're seeing, I would say, this plan is being implemented. Golden Triangle, just south of Civic Center Park. This had a new area plan recently, and it wasn't really about the land uses, because the land uses they had there, the neighborhood felt were pretty correct. A mix of uses, a good amount of height. What they wanted to spend time talking about were transportation, and especially on their edges. So here's a rendering from that plan. Broadway is correctly named, is extremely wide, and how can we use that better to make a more interesting place? So here's a future concept for Broadway. So looking south down Broadway on the left-hand side, you've got a two-way cycle track. And then adjacent to that cycle track, you've got a little B-cycle station, but if you look further down, also parking. So they've taken the parking that was against the curb and pulled it out so that people biking feel very safe. The traffic isn't moving next to them. They're protected by things like parking and things like B-cycle stations, and they've got trees for shade. And on the right-hand side, where you've got the transit today, let's upgrade that transit. Let's color the transit lane, let's put in better stations. And all of a sudden, the street doesn't feel so formidable to have to cross. And you start bringing in some shade, and you start making more of a place. This is the kind of vision that can be in a neighborhood plan. And I would suggest to you the word vision suggests there should be a lot of pictures. Because when you go back to an old plan, you flip through, you look for the maps, you look for the pictures, and everybody can say, yes, that's what we were talking about. As Spear cuts through the Golden Triangle, the north-south street grid of the city is met at funny angles by Spear, and you end up with these little triangles. And they're kind of this difficult waste of space. So what this plan said is, let's take these and over a period of steps, a period of time, as funding is available, let's, down at the bottom, let people cross and give them some shade and let them be there if they want to be there. If there's a coffee shop nearby, they can take their coffee and sit there. And then over time, even close one or both of the streets adjacent to the triangle, provided that Public Works studies it and knows that traffic has a way to route around, and attach them to the adjacent buildings. So you can really make a place of these otherwise leftover spaces. I talked about doing multiple neighborhoods together, and this is something I've been advocating for. When you are too strict about what you mean by a neighborhood, you often leave off your key edges. And when we think about growth in Denver, both new people moving here and our kids growing up and moving out on their own, and having kids of their own, we will be growing. And a lot of the places it makes sense to grow is on our corridors where there's the best transit options. When you connect multiple neighborhoods together, that means you're going to talk about all those corridors rather than the corridors being on the edge of the plan and my neighborhood plan talking about one half of the street and your neighborhood plan talking about the other half. The Elyria-Swansea plan has a lot of transportation recommendations, a lot of corridors, and a lot of edges. And a lot of the transportation recommendations here are being worked on now through the NDCC process, the North Denver Cornerstone Collaborative. Spinning off from this plan and following the recommendations in this plan, there's a master plan. So this is not the same type of plan. It's just a more detailed implementation plan for the National Western Center itself. So it meshes with all the recommendations, the Elyria-Swansea plan on one side, the Globeville plan on the other side, but then goes in more depth talking about and envisioning, there's that word again, how to use this space that for the last many decades is just used a few times a year. And you really wouldn't go there, and it's hard to go through there. So this master plan takes the transportation recommendations and land use recommendations from the small area plans and fleshes them out to talk about what the spaces should look and feel like, how they can be used at various times of year, including the concept of a festival park. Right now, when big events come to town and we put them in our parks, they're right adjacent to low-scale residential neighborhoods, and you've got conflicts with noise, conflicts with traffic. Here you have something that's slightly off on its own, and in the winter, while it might be used for livestock pens for the stock show, in the summer it could be an event venue and making more use of our land that way. This illustrates connections going east and west. You'll see those little arches or bridges. So how do you know if you already have a neighborhood plan? Because if you have one, you should become familiar with it because it's on the books and you can wave it around and go to your neighborhood group and say, what things do we want to work on this year and what of those are already called for in a plan? So you know you have that extra ability to say the city's already said we have an intention to work on these things. Go to denvergov.org/planning. There's a link to a map that has all the adopted plans in the city. Now, just a word of caution, if you scroll through the list, you might not recognize the name of your plan, even if it's your plan. I would recognize the Curtis Park Neighborhood Plan, but my current neighborhood plan is called the Northeast Downtown Neighborhoods Plan. I might scroll right by that, not knowing what that is. So the easiest way to use this map is to scroll in and click or type in an address, and it will tell you all the plans that are relevant to your area. Comp plan applies everywhere, blueprint applies everywhere, but you might have a small area plan and you might have some other types of plans. Not everywhere has a small area plan though. The green area on this map is only 19.2% of the land area of the city, and that's places in the city that have a small area plan. It could be a neighborhood plan, corridor plan. You see those kind of circular ones, those are station area plans, adopted since Blueprint Denver was adopted in 2002. The tan areas have a neighborhood plan, but it was before 2002, and that's another 38% of the city, or 36% of the city. But the white areas in the city don't have any plan at all. This is fundamentally a resource issue. The planning department, community planning and development, has never had the resources needed to do a plan for every part of the city. So where have they done plans? If we go back to last week, areas of change and areas of stability, you'll see where there's red here and there's an area of change. There's a pretty good overlap, especially in that center section, with the places that have recent plans. And the further northeast, where there are areas of change, they have plans as well. They're a little bit older. They predate Blueprint Denver, but they have plans. So the planning department has rationally allocated their limited resources to making sure we have a plan, we have a community vision where we're expecting change. But a lot of these other areas are seeing change happen, maybe not on the same scale, but the whole city is growing and changing. And it's those neighborhoods that have not had the benefit of a year to sit down together, direct the future direction of the city for their area. So when change happens in zoning, when change happens in things actually getting built, they know they were in the driver's seat. So I'm going to hand it over to Steve Nally, and he's going to talk more about neighborhood plans, but also about, I hope, the plan for every neighborhood to have a neighborhood plan. Interneighborhood Cooperation, the co-host of this event, 2 years ago called on the city that every neighborhood should have a neighborhood plan every 15 years. And we're getting good response from the mayor in the budget and city council, and making some progress that Steve is leading.
Thank you, Joel. I'm Steve Nally. I'm the Neighborhood Planning Supervisor in Community Planning and Development. There will be a little bit of redundancy. We're really trying to drive these points home about what goes into a neighborhood plan. So stick with us. We do have some exciting exercises coming up after the break. So let's talk about the time horizon of a neighborhood plan. Plans are for the future. Think for a second 20 years ago and how much has changed since, and then think for a second what could happen 20 years from now. When we say time horizon, that's most of our plans are typically looking out 20 years into the future or trying to anticipate change 20 years into the future. A lot happens in 20 years. We've argued internally that it should be more like 10 years or 15 years. Also think about how market forces and catalysts for change may affect a neighborhood in the future. A catalyst for change could be a light rail station is opening in your neighborhood. A commuter rail station is opening in your neighborhood. A new park is coming online. There are changes to those parks happening. These are all catalysts that may trigger other change happening in a neighborhood. So these are the things we think about. This is an aerial image from 1956. Just making sure it looks the same on this screen as it does on that screen. It does. We're good. So this is Union Station, right here in the center. And we have basically, the Platte River here and the Central Platte Valley looks totally different today. we were asking ourselves as planners and as a city, what should we do with this space a long time ago. We talked about the Winter Olympics, and this could potentially be that space for the Winter Olympics. But we started thinking about the future a very, very long time ago. We wrote a plan, actually many plans, and this is one from the early 90s that called for redevelopment. It called for Commons Park, it called for Confluence Park, it called for multiple bridges connecting 16th Street, tearing down viaducts. It called for what you're seeing in this image. In 1995, and I actually think the date's wrong on this because Coors Field was built in 1995. This is about 1992, perhaps, because Coors Field is under construction. Not a whole lot had happened, but some major steps were starting to fall into place. The consolidated main line, the rail had been consolidated by this point. Some of the viaducts had been torn down. Some things are starting to happen. Fast forward to 2000, some more things are happening on this map. We have the Pepsi Center. We have Coors is now in the picture. Commons Park was built. We have the Confluence Park in place. You can see the viaducts are gone. Some things are starting to happen here. 2012, a lot happening here. We have new bridges connecting downtown to the Highlands. We have development along Little Raven Street. We have development coming into place behind Union Station. And it's 2016 now. Every single one of these sites are either under construction or complete. A lot has changed, but it took a long time, and it took that vision dating way back. So that's what we do as planners. That's what we want you all to participate in as the community. And really why we write neighborhood plans. Neighborhood plans engage the neighborhood, the community in a dialogue about the future. Where are we going? It defines that vision and identifies how to achieve it. It guides future growth and funnels new development in appropriate areas and protects other and enhances other areas of a neighborhood. It really informs our decision making as the public sector. It also informs your decision making as the community. It creates links between these important networks within our neighborhoods. So think of the transportation network and how that relates to land use patterns. Think about major infrastructure improvements, how those relate to land use patterns. Open space, trail network, all of these things are systems that operate together. They do not operate in isolation. And you experience these things as kind of this is your life. You don't separate land use from transportation or the park from the sidewalk, and this is all your life, and you're experiencing it all at once. And so we want to talk about all of these topics throughout a neighborhood plan. We have 78 statistical neighborhoods in the city of Denver. Here's a map. These are statistical neighborhoods that were created in the 70s through a grant so we could track data over time. These align with census tracks. So we know the trends from the 70s and how 5 Points has changed or how West Highland has changed. We can see those trends. There are probably over 200 RNOs. Not everyone organizes themselves around these boundaries. We've had a number of disputes around these lines. One example is the Montbello GVR line along Chambers. The east side of Pena, a number of folks consider that Montbello, not GVR. But if we change that line, then we can't track those trends over time. So this is a very important map. We probably shouldn't have named them. We probably shouldn't have called them neighborhoods. We probably should have just said, this is how we track data. But it's very important to track that data, and we want to use more data as we move forward with our planning. So Joel hit on this point, the different scale of our planning. This is the Westwood neighborhood plan. This is a single statistical neighborhood. We plan at that scale. We also plan at the station area scale. We have 41 stations in the city. So this is the Evans station, where we typically pick up a quarter mile to a half mile, a 10-minute walk from the station, and zoom in on that station area and plan for that scale. Joel also talked about the Elyria-Swansea plan. This is a single statistical neighborhood. but it included 3 stations, 38th and Blake, National Western, and 40th and Colorado. The downtown area plan is kind of a collection of statistical neighborhoods and portions of others that create a kind of a larger area plan. We've also planned the corridor. This is Colfax between Sherman and Colorado. So how do we build a plan? How do we get the things started? We have an internal city team. It makes up most of the departments, most of the major implementing departments in the city. We hold kind of a kickoff public meeting. We ask questions like, what do you like about your neighborhood? What do you want to change? We do a typical SWOT analysis, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. We establish a community steering committee, and this is made up of a number of key leaders in the neighborhood. And it's a commitment for that steering committee to attend regular meetings and report back to their neighbors about the process. We create a vision. What do you love? How do you want to strengthen that? What are your concerns? How do you want to make your neighborhood better? What do you need in the future? Again, we're thinking about the future. We ask questions like this. Fill in the blank. Use your imagination. Think big. We have fun exercises. Again, fill in the blank. I love Golden Triangle because it feels original, so we would follow up. What does that mean to you? Let's get more information about why it feels original. All of this contributes to the vision. We spread flyers all over, trying to get as many people to our meetings and participate in our plans. This is a flyer from the Sun Valley, Decatur Federal Station Area Plan. What will make the future bright? And we translate it in Vietnamese and Spanish, again, trying to touch as many people in that community as possible. This is the bottom right photo is a steering committee, again, where the key leaders of the neighborhood are coming together and talking about all the steps of the process. It's a public meeting on the top left. We roll out maps. We use markers with the community to try to identify those issues and opportunities. We have surveys that we post online and spread throughout the meetings as well to try to get input. We take all of this input as planners. We talk about pros and cons. We come up with alternatives. We go back to the community and we weigh the alternatives and the ideas and ultimately create recommendations that make their way into the plan. So here's an example of meeting with the steering committee, talking about row houses. We heard that through the process. Where are those appropriate? So we define what is a row house, and we say where is that appropriate on the map, and we vet these ideas with the community. This person looks familiar. She's in the back. We ask the community to test these ideas, to actually get out. This is an event that we did for Golden Triangle where we took some spray paint and we painted bike lanes, and we asked people to ride bikes in those bike lanes and say, how does this feel? Do you feel safer? We had different options, and we held somewhat of a block party to try to get input and again, vet and test these ideas. Once we take all these ideas, we write a plan document. Obviously, a lot of back and forth on that draft. We take it through adoption. So we present it to planning board and ultimately take it through to city council adoption. This is what that plan document could look like. Again, this is a plan on a page. You saw one of these from the Northeast Downtown plan from Joel's presentation. This is the Golden Triangle plan, but we have the vision elements, we have the strategies, and we have those transformative projects that will really move the needle towards achieving the vision of the area. This is during the adoption of the Elyria-Swansea plan, where the community comes out and speaks about the process, and ultimately City Council adopts it. So what are the key topics covered by neighborhood plans? What do we talk about? And I've hit on a number of things, but you know, we like to talk about topics that appear in every single plan, but there will inevitably be topics that the community wants to discuss. So our always topics are things like transportation, streetscape, utilities, parks and open space, and then things related to policy and regulation, land use, zoning, other regulations like design standards and guidelines, urban design and building heights, and really getting into a conversation about neighborhood character, historic preservation, where those areas of those gems within the neighborhood that you want to protect. Economic development, is there a shopping center where the tenants have moved out? Is there something else that could be? Affordable housing, it's a crisis in our city right now, and we want to have that conversation everywhere. And then health and sustainability. We always hope that adding sidewalks will get more people out and walking on those sidewalks, which will ultimately make people healthier. We always hope that all of the recommendations that we're putting into our plan make for a healthier built environment and more sustainable decisions long term. All of our plans have focus areas, so we take a deep dive on certain shopping centers or corridors in an area. And as Joel mentioned in the Northeast Downtown Neighborhoods Plan, Curtis Park still had its section. We hope that each area, each character area will still, or neighborhood will still have a section, and we work with those individuals to make sure that section is right. Also, the transformative projects, again, these are the game-changing big ideas, major redevelopment sites that really move the needle. And then all of our plans work towards an implementation section and start to prioritize some of these recommendations. So the focus topic piece, these are all of the other things that come up during the planning process that are not always in every plan. So things like parking is an issue in our neighborhood, or brownfields, utilities are an issue, the schools are an issue, overall beautification, and then social issues like safety and crime that doesn't exist everywhere. It's a bigger issue in some parts of our city than others. The food systems, are there food deserts in these neighborhoods? Do we need to talk about food? And then special districts. Typically, we talk about special districts when we're trying to implement like a corridor improvement, code enforcement. So these are all topics, and this is not an exhaustive list. Things come up during the planning process, and we always work to prioritize those into recommendations. Looks like Che is on this slide. Sorry about that. So we have, this is the Cherry Creek area plan. And you guys learned about areas of change and areas of stability. This is an example of that, like land use topic that we will get into more detail on during the planning process. So in 2002, the Cherry Creek area was, as you know, I think from the previous session, all an area of change. We worked through that neighborhood plan and introduced quite a bit of areas of stability and reduced the area of change. So that's one topic. Here's an example of the land use map. As you can see, quite a variety of land uses in Elyria, Swansea, ranging from entertainment, culture, exhibition, which is the National Western Center, to heavy industrial, to single-family duplex. There's a lot going on in this neighborhood. Building heights map, again, another example of where those heights are appropriate. We talk about things like active edges. Where should the pedestrian entrances and windows, where is that most important? What are these key streets? This is the Alameda station. Where is open space most effective, and how does it align with our primary connections for bikes in and out? This is a fun map. This is the 40th and Colorado station, where the purple represents where one can walk today. And so this is that yellow line is the half mile. So you can see everything north of the tracks, although it's within a half mile, typical 10-minute walk. As the crow flies, you simply can't get to the station. And this is what, major conversation we had during the Elyria, Swansea and 40th and Colorado Station Area Plan. The person that lives here on 43rd, to get to the station, would have to walk down to Steele, all the way down to 40th, across 40th to Jackson and north to the station. And so the plan included a number of new street connections and sidewalk improvements. And this is the area that's now within that 10-minute walk with those new connections. So these are things we talk about during the planning process. Connecting our parks together and making sure our streets are green and accommodate cycling and walking so one can walk from one park to the next. Also, a lot of our plans include a health impact assessment. So I spoke briefly about health and sustainability. The Elyria-Swansea plan, Westwood plan, Globeville plan, the Decatur Federal Station Area plan all included a health impact assessment. And this is assessing and judging how a project or the recommendations within a plan will affect health, really focuses on the built environment, and identifies actions to prevent or manage the harmful health effects that may be occurring and that we may be able to overcome. So what happens when we finish this plan or a plan? We hope to implement it. We have three major sections of our planning documents. So infrastructure investment, this would, I went through a number of new street connections. So they inform the decision-making and funding of the major infrastructure, regulatory changes. So there's a land use map, a building heights map, those two, and other maps that may inform urban design. Those things combined inform zoning and zoning decisions, whether it's a map amendment or a text amendment. You'll learn more about that at the next session. Partnerships are a major way to implement projects in the city, working with other groups, nonprofits, other government agencies, the private sector, especially for the bigger projects that we're implementing throughout the city. So these are kind of those three main pillars to implement. We also track the implementation, kind of create a dashboard, how much of the plan has been, how many recommendations from the plan have been implemented. As you can see in this plan, we haven't started. 77% of them have not been started. This is about 3 or 4 months after we finished the Globeville plan, but some were started and underway. We like to see the progress of our plans being implemented and like to message that as, hey, remember when we talked about this thing? It's now happening, and hopefully it's making the neighborhood a better place. So I'm going to talk briefly about the Neighborhood Planning Initiative. Joel defined this problem where only 19.2% of the city is covered with area plans adopted after Blueprint. We have 78 neighborhoods, right? Statistical neighborhoods. If we continue with this kind of status quo approach of planning one neighborhood at a time, well, actually, we can typically do 2 area plans concurrently, but it's the individual neighborhood. It'll take us 78 years to cover the whole city. And that's just way too long. I mean, so much changes in 10 years. Imagine how much would change in 78 years. And so we have a new initiative where we'd like to cover 100% of the city with neighborhood plans in 10 to 14 years. This is how we're going to do it. Our core values of this initiative is to be intentional, is to be transparent. You all don't know where we're going next. You don't know where the next plan will be. You should know, so you can start getting ready, so that it'll be clear to you all what to expect. The timeline will be intentional, right? We don't want our plans to take 5 years. That's a lot of your time committed to a planning effort. We hope to get it to 18 months. Equitable. Again, we want to cover the whole city with these area plans 100%. And we want to have those always topics. So we have that foundation across the whole city with policy direction. And we want the effort to be measurable, again, using data, using the census tracts to inform us of planning need within our 78 neighborhoods, and then tracking that progress over time. The dashboard that I showed you, we want to be able to tell the story of how the neighborhood plan has been adopted. So we can't plan all the neighborhoods all at once, as you know. We don't have the resources for that. So we have to use data to inform us of the need for planning to help prioritize what neighborhood gets the next plan. So we've created buckets, these 5 buckets: livability, investment, policy, regulation, economy, and demographics. And we use these indicators to gauge the need of planning. So for example, a neighborhood that has very poor access to parks and open space, poor walk and bikeability, and the high death rates, high childhood obesity rates, not scoring well in this combination of health indicators, there's a higher need for that neighborhood to get a plan. Same with investment, considering underutilization of land, that typically if the land is more valuable than the building, then that's an indication that that building might get scraped and something may change there. We'd like to get ahead of that with the plan. Where's the permit activity happening? How's sales tax doing? Is it going up? Is it going down? Are businesses, retail establishments coming to the neighborhood or leaving? Policy and regulations. So there's a number of the areas of the city that have old code zoning versus new code zoning. You'll learn about that the next session. We want to make sure our areas of change have updated plans, because that's where we're anticipating that change to happen. Land use and zoning mismatch. So this is where blueprint or an existing plan may call for something, but the zoning allows something totally different. So an extreme example, I don't think we actually have this in the city, but a plan may call for single family, but the zoning allows industrial. That's a major mismatch. We should get in front of that. Economy, so cost burden households, median income shifts, and then high poverty levels all indicate a higher need for a plan. New households being built, or the number of households actually disappearing in a neighborhood, population shifts and job shifts, all of these things indicate whether or not a neighborhood needs a plan. We've also grouped the neighborhoods. So there's 78 neighborhoods, again, 78 years to cover the whole city. We have to group these into larger areas in order to plan in 10 to 14 years. So some things that we considered, and I'm sure you all may have comments on this map. This was a very difficult exercise, and we've actually received a lot of input from the community on this map. There's no right way to draw this map, but there are some key things to consider. So shared histories, issues and aspirations of a neighborhood, the built environment and natural features, the planning need from the indicators, the character and the development patterns of those neighborhoods, major draws. Think of DU and the influence University of Denver has on the surrounding neighborhoods. Common infrastructure, so thinking about north and south of Colfax, not just north of Colfax. The geographic size, things that we considered. We don't want really massively large areas and then very small areas. We'd like to also consider population and the size of these groupings. So we did get quite a bit of input from council. We also went to all the Denverite meetings to get input on this map. And the key piece here is we can't split our statistical neighborhoods, because then we can't track data. So I'm sure, and I had this desire too to split College View South Platte in half, for example. Well, then we can't track those trends, as I was saying earlier. So we're grouping the neighborhoods, and now we're going to take a break. So after the break, we'll have a chance for questions. We're going to actually set up the room for the exercise. So if you guys want to break now, or if you want to actually take questions now, sure.
So are you all ready for some questions? Do you need to move around a little bit? We've now unlocked the restrooms, so you can actually access the restrooms for those of you who were trying earlier. Questions now, later? We've got a question already, so let's start now. We'll do a few minutes of questioning, and then we will break so that we can return by 7:30.
Yeah, I'm curious what a perimeter plan is versus a neighborhood plan.
Do you know when that plan was adopted? So I would say it was probably adopted in the late 90s, and the perimeter plan was a term that we used in the 90s. We're not using that anymore. I would suspect that the focus of that plan would be on the surrounding streets, so probably Federal, Alameda, drawing a blank on your other surrounding streets, but that was probably more of the focus, anticipating more of the change on those surrounding streets. Yeah, so I believe the Athmar Park is here. Yeah.
So it is an older plan.
See if I can get this.
The nice thing about this map is you just go to denvergov.org/planning, find this map, but it's not just the map saying there is one or isn't one. All those are links. You can download the plan and look at it.
Any other questions?
I have a couple of questions. What you just presented seems a little more rigorous than the process that we went through at the Baker neighborhood plan in 2004, and yet has a lot of things in common. And I'm wondering to what extent there is an emerging science of planning being utilized versus maybe what you think of like, well, say Sigmund Freud had a very strong intuition and he just ran with it, and in some ways he was right, but he didn't use scientific method to produce his psychological theories, whereas now psychologists are using science to try to figure out the human mind. Where on the spectrum, that spectrum is the kind of planning that Denver seems to be implementing?
Can you talk a little bit more about Baker and the process that you went through and why you don't think it was as rigorous?
Well, it was. What I'm looking at is I'm looking at the buckets and the analysis of whether a neighborhood needs a plan and so forth. I don't think that happened as rigorously. I think we used a lot of the same tools, but I've been through a lot of planning processes, and I've seen some of those tools evolve a little bit. You know, there's always kind of this game thing happening where you have, you know, we had Baker bucks to spend, and you have the whatever bucks to spend. There's always kind of this engagement effort, which some of it seems like there's probably some academic papers that have gone into what is more effective and what is not effective in getting engagement and getting successful plans. And maybe if I could add the second question, which I was going to ask, which is, so you need engagement because you want your plans to pass city council. And I don't think, well, you want consensus. You want consensus. And that kind of brings things toward the center. And do plans ever not pass city council? And assuming that they almost never fail at city council, isn't there a risk that bold ideas will not come forward?
Okay, so to your first question, I should have been clearer, but the neighborhood planning initiative is a new effort that we're kicking off. We've actually kicked it off this year, where we are using the indicators to inform us of where to go next. As Joel mentioned in his presentation, the majority of our area plans that we were writing and how we prioritize them was mostly around our areas of change, around our stations. So that's a new effort, it's a new methodology that we're using to inform us of priority of the areas. As far as not getting or building consensus, and I should say, we don't build consensus to get through city council. We build consensus so the plans reflect the desires of the community and what the community wants to see in the future. And we don't rush to city council if that consensus has not been met. We just take longer. We have more conversation. We try to address the issues that are not agreed upon, or try to, if there's a very lofty, bold idea, we try to talk through the feasibility of that idea happening, the pros and cons of that idea, and having a good dialogue and back and forth with the community to try to reach that consensus. Yeah.
Part of the other aspect of your question seemed to be wondering if, in the process of building consensus with a diverse community, if that causes bold ideas to not come forward. And fortunately, I haven't seen that to be the case. So for instance, between here and downtown is a bunch of parking lots called Arapahoe Square. And there was a previous kind of vision in the downtown area plan for what we hoped to happen there, but it really didn't happen much. And so in the Northeast Downtown Neighborhoods Plan, we spent a lot of time reflecting on what's it going to take to get development to happen there. And that spun off activities like an urban renewal area, which opens up tax increment financing. That can be critical when an area isn't going because nobody's willing to go first, and the land values versus what you can build, the numbers don't work. So we implemented that, but we also recommended in the Northeast Downtown Neighborhoods Plan significantly higher zoning, because we in the neighborhood were starting to see what is now widely acknowledged to be an affordable housing crisis. So we said, we've kind of, there's something interesting going on when you say this is a historic neighborhood, don't change anything, but yet there's an affordable housing crisis. How are we going to house more people if we're saying don't change anything? So within the neighborhood, we actually said, let's change some things. Let's allow accessory dwelling units, which is a great way for people to be able to stay in their homes by getting rental income or having extended family, et cetera. But then right across the street in Arapahoe Square, we said, as long as the design is good, we will accept a much higher density. So it's actually, if you use a point tower form rather than just a big block, you can go 20 to 30 stories between this neighborhood and downtown, which is a huge upzoning from what there was before, driven by the vision in the plan. So the upshot is I don't think the process of finding consensus is at odds with bold ideas.
We're back. So don't grab a seat. Stay on your feet. We're going to have some fun exercises coming up here. All right, guys, so you don't have to sit back down, just stay on your feet. We're going to move into the exercise portion of the evening. We have 2 fun exercises for you tonight. The first exercise is actually a little faster than the second exercise. But these are 2 exercises that we have used in our planning processes that make people talk with one another, with each other, and make decisions and try to build consensus. So the first exercise, you're actually going to be making decisions on your own, individually. You're placing dots on your own opinion. The second exercise, you're going to actually have to talk to the people at your table, and you all are going to have to try to reach consensus together. So let me explain the first exercise. This is the ingredients for a complete neighborhood in Denver. So we have different categories. Transportation and infrastructure. Amenities is one category, civic amenities, community destinations. So we have a pretty exhaustive list of ingredients, things like sidewalks and landscaping and furnishings, libraries, destinations, that you all are voting. The green sticker is place a green sticker next to the amenities that make your neighborhood complete. So these things are already in your neighborhood. So you have some green stickers. And you have some blue stickers. Place a sticker next to the amenities that are missing in your neighborhood. You'll notice that you only have 3 of each color. So you're going to have to prioritize. You're going to have to make some decisions. What's most important? What is that amenity that is really making your neighborhood complete? Or what is that amenity that's totally missing from your neighborhood? So that's the first part. We're going to spend about 5 minutes on that. The second part is what we call the right-of-way game. And this is a picture of us playing it at for Washington Street in the Glowville neighborhood. But the street actually tonight on the table is Walton Street, which is right outside. This is a really fun game where you have red lines on the map. That represents the public right-of-way. So on the street side of that red line is public right-of-way, right? On the other side of that line, you have private property. So you have a number of pieces. Not all the pieces fit within the right-of-way. So you're going to have a conversation about what you value, what you want to see happen on that street, whether it's transit, more parking, more travel lanes for cars, or bike lanes, a median, planted median, really wide sidewalks, not so wide sidewalks. You all are going to be working as a group and talking about what you value in that right-of-way. You can't go past the red line because that means we're buying property, right? So that's the rule. You can't break that rule. Everything's to scale. I believe you've got about 80 feet to play with. Use it wisely. So the way we're going to do this, we're going to break you all into 2 different groups. So if we could have the folks at the back table kind of walk towards the board in the back of the room, and the folks kind of in the front walk towards the board over here. And we'll spend about 5 minutes at these boards. You're placing your dots. And then I'll make the call. We'll shift over to same group over to the table, and we'll play the right-of-way game. Take it away.
These are all amendments.
All right, guys and gals, it's time for the right-of-way game. If you would, just walk over to the table. You have some pieces. Again, this is Welton between 27th and 28th. Welton currently is a one-way street heading northbound. The trains go north and south, so two-way trains on a single track. You've got sidewalks, you've got parking, you've got two travel lanes north, and you have a transit lane. We have all of those pieces, so I always suggest build what's already out there with the pieces. So you've got your parking, place your parking where you see parking. You've got sidewalks, place your sidewalks where you see those sidewalks. And your transit-only lane and travel lanes, etc. And then to have a conversation is this right for this street? Should we see something else here? You've got about 15 minutes. Everything's to scale.
Where the building is built is not always right up to the...
I know that, but I'm just saying, is it for real? Because it's like every side street is...
I've never heard that.
I have never...
Yeah, we talk about tree lines all the time. Yeah. Do you feel safer, though, when there's a tree lawn next to you walking on the sidewalk versus right on the curb and you have travel lanes? Yeah, that's...
Totally agree with you.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
The retail, the consensus building, I'm going to put this out there on the, I would take this is the amenity side.
Oh, it's put it full lane.
So you get rid of the parking.
Oh, so we still
So we're losing 1 lane of parking.
Yeah. So we have two-way parking. We have no travel lanes. How do these cars actually travel to the parking spot? Yeah. So that's parking. No.
That was driving.
Yeah, now we're driving. All right. All right, so
Oh, we could just get rid of the light rail. Before doing the street.
all right, so we have one travel lane. Is that northbound or southbound? Doesn't matter.
Going the right way. This is where a streetcar didn't require.
Ah, see. So you have two-way bikes, but one-way traffic. Is that right? Okay.
Or two-way traffic.
But I'm not seeing two-way traffic. Okay. So you've also got some trees.
I would like to see. You guys think about putting trees on the sidewalk?
Put the trees on the sidewalk.
That's a sidewalk.
See, they can do trees and then do the concrete and then.
So a few things I want you guys to consider. We've got, think of like the network. We've got two-way bikes, right, and just one-way travel. I like it, but I want you guys to think about that a little bit more. Is it better to have two-way traffic and two-way bikes? Think of some other ideas of
I don't mind two-way.
For one-way, and makes sense. Yeah. One thing about one-way streets, though, is that they tend to move faster and carry more traffic, right? And so Welton's one-way, it actually slows things down. You have more, it's better for business because you have both directions of traffic. To have a two-way street, yeah, so that's why I'm throwing that out there.
Yeah, because how is that going to happen? Yeah. If it only goes one way, then you have, I like that. You have like maybe 2 lanes. I used to live in Melbourne, Australia, which is where I'm from, and all what we call trams are all shared. It's all road level streetcars, and it's everywhere. And
So
it does work.
If there's traffic, do the trains get traffic?
Yeah, so the traffic will line up behind these as they stop, and what they do is put a clearway in during peak times. So this will become a clearway. Cars cannot park there during peak times.
Oh, okay.
There'll be 2 lanes of traffic during certain peak hours.
Okay.
All right, so I'm gonna ask you guys to wrap up your conversations, and then we're gonna actually find our seats. If we could all sit back down, and then we're gonna report out. All right, is it Caleb? Yeah. We're gonna start with Caleb. So report out on the right-of-way game, then we'll go to this group next. And then I would also like to talk about just the activity overall and any other Q&A that you may have. So take it away, Caleb.
Thank you. So we went through a couple of different iterations of what we were doing here. Basically, on the outside of the streets, we have widened the sidewalk with space for amenity cafes and whatnot, with some greens, not necessarily the green space, but the widened sidewalks on both sides of the street. Transit stays where it is. Maybe moves over a little bit. There was some debate about actually the type of rolling stock that was used originally with the light rail rollout, and we were definitely fans of moving towards a level floor. Yep. So that would allow maybe some removal of these big concrete blocks. So where the what do we call them, Steve? The ramps, high blocks. To come up. So it's still 2 lanes of traffic. It could be a 2-way street, but we could leave it as it was, and then essentially parking that protected a bike lane, which butted up to the next widened sidewalk for amenities. I think Welton Street, we kind of all agreed, is going to become through this more of a pedestrian-friendly spot, and definitely friendly for businesses because of these sidewalks. So that's where we got to. We also said that we should just move to Australia and be in Melbourne, Australia. So, yeah.
Okay, so basically, we didn't really come to consensus. We're actually looking. This is a hybrid. We've actually got 2 plans. So. Part of it has to do, again, we don't know the neighborhood well enough to know the traffic patterns. And then some questions came up as to zoning and what the build out could be. So it really gets down to what the priorities are. Is it actually moving traffic or is it pedestrian? So in one of the scenarios, we've got an enlarged sidewalk with restaurant areas facing the smaller buildings on this side, smaller commercial. We did 2 lanes of bicycle, each direction, parking, which protects the bicycle lanes, and then we've got 1 lane of travel, and then the light rail or a trolley cart would be smaller, so it wouldn't need as much space, hopefully, and then a large sidewalk. So the thought there is we were moving things around, but the priority here becomes the pedestrian environment, not so much the traffic. We have 1 row of moving traffic. And we even talked about doing it both ways as well. So then in this scenario, it's more focused on the traffic. We've got just smaller sidewalk. We've got some green space, parking. Then we've got one-way traffic, but 2 lanes, transit. Then we've got some green space with trees adjacent to the trolley, and then a sidewalk. So a little more focus for transportation. But we again, here, what's interesting is we do have trees on both sides and some green space, which can be paved over for access to the transportation train or not. So that's kind of, so we were kind of going around and around, and it is difficult. It's a difficult question because it does matter what your priorities are and what you're expecting it to do. And again, these are streets, so they can evolve over time. So it's a question of where you do the infrastructure investment.
Live here. All right. Thanks, Miles. So I want you all to talk a little bit about, if you raise your hand, I'll bring the mic to you, about the differences between these 2 exercises. And one you're thinking individually, the other you're talking with the group, and you mentioned, Miles, that you weren't able to come to consensus. This group seemed to come to consensus. So what was that like for you? And just explain that experience, and which exercise did you prefer? So any of those topics. Anyone want to answer that?
I think I like the second one better, and the reason I liked it better because it leads you to believe that you need, in order to design something, you have to have multiple interests involved in the planning process. And when someone's missing from there, it's easy to put a plan together that doesn't ultimately work for the folks that you were trying to put that in place, whether it's the residents, the businesses, the city, the planning office, or in this particular case, transit. Without RTD and having a commitment that they can make some changes, we really couldn't design the ultimate change we wanted to make. And then not knowing those dollars which are available to us. So I really like this one better. The other one is more silent. You're putting your dots up. You get a sense of feeling that you're putting something out there, but it doesn't really tell you how it works with everybody else. And when I did mine, I did it from my neighborhood's perspective. And this one was done from a real specific area that all of us were looking at the same time.
Any other thoughts? Yeah.
So I'd take the other stance. I think this exercise sort of provided an opportunity to get some perspectives and kind of gave you an overall picture of, okay, where are areas that we need to improve? Now let's do something like this. Whereas this, I was kind of confused as to like what sort of problem we were trying to solve. I still don't know if we really solved anything, but with this exercise, I think you could kind of see like there are some areas where we seem to have a lot of benefits, and some gaps that we could maybe address with an exercise like this.
So we often use both types of exercises and other exercises during a neighborhood planning process. One benefit, as you mentioned, if you look at this, a number of folks said that they're missing they're missing grocery stores in their neighborhoods. And then also a number of folks said they really like the open space. And so you can visually see the consensus without people actually talking at all. And so that's an important aspect to take away. And this helps the planners to get a sense of the overall consensus. So we could do that exercise individually and then do it where people are talking together, and those two exercises combined lead to a better impression of what the neighborhood wants. As far as solving the problem, for the right-of-way game, that's something that happens early in the planning process. We define all of those problems, and typically we play the right-of-way game for one of the most problematic streets in the neighborhood. So we played it for Washington Street in Gloveville. We played it for Brighton Boulevard for Rhino. And it really, people have a clear understanding of what the problems are, and it is a good exercise to have a conversation with the group. So I'd like to open it up to any other questions you guys had, comments about the presentation, anything else, any other questions about neighborhood planning? I think I can make it. All right.
I'd just like to say that I'm just now catching on where you were coming from with these exercises, because I spent a fair amount of time looking at the stickers on the board, wondering, how do planners take these boards and then turn them into a objective evaluation? Whereas you're saying that it's a communication tool within the group, and yet it was at the Denver Right meetings, it seemed like planners wanted this information from us, and they wanted to then take it away and analyze it somehow. But I'm hearing from you tonight that it may be more of a conversation starter. And then this, I was totally frustrated by, because we don't have the context. None of us at our table knew the priorities in the neighborhood, and yet as a tool within a actual planning process for a small area plan, all the people at the table would probably have a good sense of the problem and be able to share their views of that problem. So am I getting it right that you're trying to introduce us to tools rather than get feedback from us?
That's right. I mean, this is the academy. This is an academic exercise. We actually have a plan written for Northeast Downtown neighborhood that includes Welton. It talks about the changing the vehicle, and we have that guidance. We play the right-of-way game during the Northeast Downtown neighborhoods plan, and we use this very board to talk about Welton. The other piece with this board is not only do the planners see where the clusters are of dots, but everyone else sees them at the end of the meeting and starts to get an understanding with their group of what the priorities are. So, other questions?
So we are now coming up to the end of the Citizens Planning Academy session number 2 on small area planning. Thank you for your participation this evening. At your tables, there are hard copies, as promised, of that survey. Honest to gosh, we really do use the feedback from those surveys, so please take a moment or two. There's like 4 questions. It's super simple. If you want a response, let me know. Andrea Burns, our communications director, is waving in from the back of the room to say one thing really quickly.
To your question, I just wanted to also add that the planners are taking the data from those meetings and they are analyzing it. We are going to present some of those findings and numbers and outcomes on our website after we get through all of it. But it wasn't just an exercise for others to see and to communicate with each other. It's both. So.
Will you help us when you do that by sharing your method of analysis, because that's what puzzles me about how you could analyze that in a way that you can't just shift it whatever way you want depending on how your biases are. Just like, have you ever heard of the book How to Lie with Maps? Well, you can create a map that will say anything you want, and you can do heat maps and just change the factors so that the density looks just right where you want it. And the same could happen by choosing the types of things you represent on here, or by guiding the people as you're describing things to them. So I worry that there's not a objective way to analyze it.
And that's certainly one of the goals of this whole strategic approach to neighborhood planning. For example, one of our goals as a department, as an agency, is to lend greater transparency. This isn't voodoo, right? It's not voodoo. It's not magic. It's a process, and we want it to be a very public and accessible process. So that's great feedback to provide a little bit of a narrative behind the magic. I just said it wasn't magic, but behind the process for figuring out what messages we can pull from this and truth checking that, right? Making sure that we're getting the message right. John.
Not to belabor this, but I think you're hitting on something. Just kind of what you're saying, Steve, is it's one of the reasons I'm here is because just being out in the community, there's skepticism about the planning process, or people don't understand it. They're uneducated about it. That's why I'm here, because I want to learn more so I could go out there and educate people about, well, here's what really happens. But I think Steve's kind of saying what I hear a lot in the community is, we don't understand how this all happens. It's more of a comment than a question. I mean, and
through this a lot. It's not like I'm inexperienced at it. I'm still mystified by it, and I think maybe there's a new direction in CPD, but that direction changes every few years, and so I'm not sure how long it will last. I like what I heard tonight, but I'm not. I think my skepticism is coming from experience.
And you're in season 2 now of the Citizens Planning Academy. This isn't something that's been offered previously within the city and county of Denver. There's a sincere, I don't know if people can just trust you if you just say it's sincere, if you trust that it actually is sincere, but I'll put it out there anyway and we'll prove it, that it is a sincere interest in wanting to make sure that people understand. We're demystifying the process. Folks are frustrated a lot of times because they don't know how to get involved in the process, and when they're in the process, they don't have a great understanding of the process. It's amazing that we have such interest in from folks to come to Citizens Planning Academy to learn about the process before there's actually anything on the table in front of them. You're just learning about how the whole thing works and how to get involved and how to be a part of that. So all of that is just my way of I think this academy itself is another piece of evidence towards that goal of wanting to get folks the information they need to be involved in a meaningful way. Doesn't mean everybody has to agree. We have everybody has different perspectives, even within the planning staff, even within your individual tables, folks have different perspectives, and that's not our goal, isn't to get everybody hammered into buying into the same worldview. But so long as you understand how you can be inserted into the process and make your voice heard, I think that's a success right there. So tell your friends, tell your neighbors. We, as you know, as you are very well aware, we are recording all of these sessions, and so we do want to make this. Yeah, everybody, pat a camera person on the back on your way out. Hug a planner and pat a camera person. That's the message for today. Because we do want to make this more available to folks. It's in everybody's interest. It's in the city's interest. It's in the neighborhood's interest. It's in the neighborhood organization's interest for everybody to understand the process more. So we'll continue to grow this program. This is the second year. Third year, we'll probably add another session too to answer some additional questions that continue to come up, perhaps in site planning, more detailed information on that. So that's my 2 cents on the value of the Citizens Planning Academy and the direction that we want to go as an agency. Any other final thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, hopes, fears, dreams? Big round of applause, please, for Joel and Steve. Donated their time this evening. Thank you. And a round of applause for you as well for coming out on a Broncos night in election season during flu season as well. So thank you all for showing up today and being a part of this. Take care.